Classroom Management Tips by Alicia, Cassandra, and Zach. There are several tips we will be talking about. They are taking charge of your classroom, keeping an eye on your student, focusing on disruptive students, establishing consequences, and giving incentives.
Tip number 1, take charge of your classroom.
This is an example of what a teacher shouldn't do.
The teacher has no control over her classroom. She is easily frustrated and yelling, which only gets more of a rise out of the students.
Monitoring behavior during whole class presentations requires that you stand or sit where you can see the faces of all students and that you can scan the room frequently.
What the teacher should have done. The teacher should be calm and able to gain control of his or her classroom without too much time being wasted. The teacher should also be able to see each student and able to address them easily within the classroom during instruction.
When confronted with an unruly class, the best thing you can do is slow your instruction down. Too many teachers have the opposite reaction to unruly students. They get stressed and excitable, and they speed things up. They talk louder and faster, and they even show their anger. One way to positively gain control and respect back from your class is to use the slow down strategy.
Slow down strategy step 1.
Do not begin instruction until you have everyone's attention. Decide that no matter what, you will not talk over your students, and you will not move on until you have everyone's attention.
Slow down strategy step 2.
Speak softly and slowly. Make your students strain to hear what you have to say.
Slow down strategy step 3.
Use short, direct sentences. Offer simple instructions.
Slow down strategy step 4.
Pause often. This technique has a way to draw attention to you and focus on what you have to say.
Slow down strategy step 5.
Do not transition to a new activity until everyone fully understands the instructions. It is important to point out that the slow down strategy is just a starting point, a way to get your class under control. You can increase speed and complexity of your instruction as your students become more attentive and more responsive to you. But being unhurried is always a good idea.
Tip number 2, keep an eye on your students.
To monitor classroom behavior effectively, you must know what to look for. 2 categories of behavior are especially important to monitor. 1. Student involvement in learning activities. 2. Student compliance with classroom rules and procedures. When instructing a small group of students while the remainder of the class is engaged in individual work, sit where you have an unobstructed view of all students. Don't become so absorbed in working with the small group that you lose track of the other students. Look up frequently and be alert for problems.
This is an example of what a teacher shouldn't do.
The teacher isn't paying any attention to the students. She is on her phone and computer. She never looks up to check on them.
When students are working on individual assignments and you are not instructing a group, monitor the class by moving around the classroom and checking each student's progress periodically.
What the teacher should have done. The teacher is sitting at her desk, but she is communicating with the students and frequently looking up to check on them. The students are well behaved when they know the teacher is paying more attention to them.
Tip number 3, focus on disruptive students.
Inappropriate behavior must be handled promptly to keep it from continuing and spreading. Behaviors that you should be concerned about include lack of involvement in learning activities, prolonged inattention or work avoidance, and obvious violations of classroom rules and procedures.
This is an example of what a teacher shouldn't do. The teacher is busy hanging stuff on the wall. She never looks at the students and never acknowledges the students' disruptive behavior.
Sometimes it is inconvenient or interrupt the lesson flow to respond to the minor misbehavior immediately. If the behavior is not disruptive or is not likely to spread to other students, make a mental note of the problem and continue the activity until a more appropriate time occurs.
What the teacher should have done. The teacher is giving eye contact with the students, reminding the disruptive student of the correct procedure and regrouping the students to get back on task. Behavior alternatives.
Make eye contact with or move closer to the student. Use a signal such as a finger to the lips or a head shake to prompt the appropriate behavior. Monitor until the student complies. If the student is not following a procedure correctly, a simple reminder of the correct procedure may be effective. You can either state the correct procedure or ask the student whether he or she remembers it. When the student is off task, that is, not working on an assignment, redirect his or her attention to the task. Check the student's progress shortly thereafter to make sure he or she is continuing to work. Ask or tell the student to stop the inappropriate behavior, then monitor until it stops and the student begins constructive activity. The 4 response options just outlined are easy to use, cause little interruption of class activities, and enable students to correct their behavior. However, when a student persists in an unacceptable behavior, other alternatives should be used.
Tip number 4, establish consequences.
It has been estimated that 90% of student misbehavior can be stopped by increasing student engagement and participation. Frequently, students are acting up because they're bored. The first thing you could do with your students is to set clear expectations. Explain what you expect from them before the actions are made, not after. The second thing you can do is to have clear boundaries. Students need to know exactly where you draw the line. And the third thing is to be proactive. Find a way to channel your student behavior into something positive and productive. For instance, if you have a student who likes to wander around the room, maybe he can be the person who collects papers or passes them out.
This is an example of what a teacher shouldn't do. The teacher is doing her own thing in the classroom. One of the students is misbehaving. The teacher quickly sends the student out of the room to go to the office. She never consults with the student and to find out what the real problem is.
No matter how clear your expectations, no matter how firm your boundaries, some students will test those boundaries. Don't be surprised by this. Expect for it and plan for it. The consequence of breaking a boundary should logically follow the offense.
What the teacher should have done. The teacher should regroup the students and maintain eye contact. He or she should also get on the same eye level with the students and calmly talk with them about their behavior. This is the easiest way to start coming up with a solution to the problem.
Consequences should be connected to the situation. Consequences are meant to teach the unavoidable life lesson. There's always a consequence for your actions. You need to provide an honorable alternative in the form of a choice. And built into the consequence is a chance to try again. They are an educational process. And also consequences convey respect for the child by allowing responsibility to be placed where it belongs, and that is with the child.
Tip number 5, give incentives.
All teachers prefer to rely on their students' intrinsic motivation to encourage them to do their homework and focus on classroom activities, but many supplement the internal drive to succeed with external rewards. Rewards such as free time, school supplies, or tasty treats can help kids master the expectations of acceptable classroom behavior and scholastic achievement. Here are 10 tips for using rewards in the classroom. Tip number 1. Keep the reward system simple. A complicated behavior system is difficult and time-consuming to manage. Tip number 2. Make the reward meaningful to your students. Opportunities for student choice can be particularly effective. Tip number 3. Use rewards to get students off to a good start with a specific behavior. Tip number 4. Focus on one behavior at a time. You have your students help select it. Tip number 5. Reward students for showing responsibility. Shift the emphasis of the classroom management system from the teacher to the students. Tip number 6. Begin by rewarding students often, and then gradually reduce the rewards and maintain expectations. Tip number 7. Give consistent rewards for academic achievement. Tip number 8. Raise the expectations that must be met for the rewards as the student progresses. Tip number 9. Think in short term. A system that is no longer needed after a few weeks has done its job. Tip number 10. Modify behavior systems for students with extreme problems. Frequent smaller rewards given to these students may have more benefit. This is an example of what a teacher shouldn't do. The teacher doesn't see the student misbehaving and gives him all of the incentives. The other students weren't awarded any incentives for doing as they were asked. Research results from Cotton 1988 say the following about the effects of reinforcement in general on students' academic achievement. Contingent reinforcement is positively related to achievement, while non-contingent reinforcement is unrelated to achievement in most cases. However, there is evidence that low ability and younger children receive some academic benefit from non-contingent, socially motivated praise. Acknowledging correct responses as such is positively related to achievement. Reinforcements are most effective when clearly linked to students' progress toward goals. Achievement benefits occur at the same rate whether students only receive rewards for correct answers, or both receive rewards for correct answers and lose them for incorrect answers. Instructional reinforcement alone produces achievement benefits equal to those produced by a combination of instructional and behavioral reinforcement. What the teacher should have done. The teacher notices the misbehavior, addresses it to the student, and then hands out the incentives to the students that were doing what they were asked. This will allow the disruptive student to see that if he or she acts appropriately, he or she may also get the incentives. Praise is the type of reinforcement most commonly used by teachers. Until fairly recently, it was assumed that praise has reinforcing effects on students' academic performance. Research by Wahlberg and Lysowski indicate that praise may be helpful, neutral, or detrimental depending on the kind of praise it is and the context in which it is delivered. The findings include: teacher praise does not necessarily reinforce learning, nor is it always intended to do so. Various other reasons, such as a desire to fill students' emotional needs or manage their behavior, frequently motivate praise. Praise can enhance learning if it is contingent, specific, sincere, and credible. Teachers whose students achieve most are sparing rather than effusive in praising correct answers. Greater achievement gains are noted when praise is delivered privately, rather than when it is given in public. Greater achievement gains occur when the interactions in which praise is given are initiated by teachers rather than by the students. When students are praised for their present progress relative to past performance, greater achievement gains result when they are praised relative to the performance of their classmates. Non-contingent praise is negatively related to achievement for high-ability students. Praising students who answer correctly in class discussion is often intrusive and distracting, and may even embarrass the student. When correct responses are acknowledged as such, yes, correct, that's right, achievement benefits result.